What are we learning from these actions of the Trump
I
campaign?
mean, I I think you're dealing with a toddler. I think you're dealing with a child that's throwing a temper tantrum. His VP pick has embarrassed him more than helped him. I think. JD Vance is really, I think he may have taken the prize from Sarah Palin as worst VP
Wow, that's a big
candidate, which
call.
is
Today's episode of Socially Democratic is now on Patreon. Join our Socially Democratic community on Patreon for free or for as little as $2.50 a month, and you can help support the show so we can do more things like have live shows and connect fellow listeners with each other and help make this little centre-left podcast the voice for social democrats in the face of hostile right-wing media. And when you sign up as a campaign organiser, for example, you get a haters gonna hate and the rest vote Labor merch. You get access to our premium episodes and a free ticket to one of our live shows. And we'd like to thank our latest members on Patreon: Ian Hume, Rebecca Thizzo, Declan M, Maddie Knox, and James J, and Susan Genvy. Thank you to those comrades that have signed up. And to join those wonderful human beings, click on the Patreon link in the show's bio to become a subscriber to our Patreon. Today's episode is also brought to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place, including community-based organisations, trade unions, progressive businesses, and social democratic parties across the globe. We develop community engagement strategies to win campaigns both big and small, and we train engagement staff and volunteers in the Marshall-Gantz framework of leadership, organising, and action. We also help folks want to craft their story through the practice of public narrative that connects people through their shared values and moves them to act together. And if you want to create change in your community, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. Today's episode is also brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. As Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm, Maurice Blackburn believe the law should serve everyone and not just those who can afford it. Maurice Blackburn have helped influence some of Australia's most important legal decisions, including equal pay for women and Indigenous workers, and helped over 500,000 Australians get the compensation they deserve. Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, experience you can count on. Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left politics and organising podcast, out every Friday, that dives into the progressive campaigns of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. And we're going abroad today to speak to Sara Valenzuela, who is a New York-based gov relations and public relations expert. She's had over 20 years of working on the Hill on various Democratic campaigns, both at a presidential level, at a Senate level, and at a state level. And she's on the show today to talk about US politics. And I'm looking forward to having a chat to Sara about all of the things that have been happening. It's so exciting. The energy coming out of the US at the moment for the Democratic side is palpable. And we'll get a sense of what exactly that is like when we talk to Sara on today's show. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get the podcast. And if you like the show, please give us 5 stars and leave us a review on your Apple Podcast app. And to support the show, don't forget to sign up to the Patreon page for all the show updates, merchandise, and more. And everything else, follow Dunn Street on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And LinkedIn. I forgot about LinkedIn. Okay, finally, let's get to today's episode. We are taping this one on a Friday morning on the lands of the Wurundjeri people in the Kulin Nation. And today's episode, we are turning our attention over to the Pacific because there is a US presidential election going on, if we hadn't realized. And we are joined today to unpack all of the craziness that's happened over the last, so much has happened in the last month alone. She brings over 20 years experience working on the Hill, working for the US Senate caucus and various other Democratic senators, plus at a state level in New York. She's a native Texan, and she joins us on the line from her hometown at the moment. We've managed to catch her at hanging out with her folks, and I'm sure she's getting some good home cooking. Sara Valenzuela, welcome to Socially Democratic.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm in my hometown of San Antonio. I do call New York City home now, and as a newly elected New York State delegate, My parents are crying a little bit on the inside, but I am a New Yorker, I suppose, now because of that.
Where is your sporting allegiances? Like, are you still like an Astros fan now, or are you Yankees or Mets? What's
I'm
going on
very
in that
afraid to
world?
answer. I'm afraid to answer that question. But on behalf of my father, let's go Dallas Cowboys,
Okay.
San Antonio Spurs, and I'll leave it at that.
Oh, okay, rightio then. The Cowboys, America's former team, after they were replaced by the wonderful New York. Geez, that's an absolute massive faux pas by the New England Patriots, I should say.
Oh
All of my
dear.
Boston friends are now going to beat the shit out of me when I go back to the States. Okay, let's not talk about sport and let's actually talk about politics. So, man, we've got so much to cover. I really want to go to um, talking about this shift that we saw from the campaign supporting President Biden to now all coalescing and falling behind Vice President Harris. Take us to the moment. I want to get a sense of what was going through your mind when you were watching the debate between President Trump and former host of The Apprentice, Donald Trump. Um,
Appropriate title. Yes.
yeah. Like, did you feel like the president's candidacy was in jeopardy by the end of that debate?
Look, I think that for a lot of us, there's always been just concern over the fact that the Democratic Party, the bench of players that we have for the Democratic Party is aging more and more, and we haven't done as much to really get this younger population of leaders both supported and integrated into these spaces where they're going to be our candidates. And that was very apparent when we were watching him struggle on stage. I do want to say that regardless of his performance, I think that President Biden has done an incredible job. I mean, he has so many decades of experience. And for us in the 2020 campaign, he was the perfect candidate. I think that we needed somebody who could bring the country together, who had a history of being able to work with both sides of the aisle and also create compromise. I think that Republicans respected him and Democrats. So I do think that it was a sad thing to watch, as anyone does, even with an aging parent or anybody else. You're watching these incredibly wise and important figures age. And it's not that his administration would have struggled, but I think any of us as human beings know that when you're watching a leader on stage, you want to feel confidence in them. And I will say the American public, and you saw it from talking heads to just murmurs on social media, that there was some concern. Is this really the guy? Is he going to be able to have the stamina and the wherewithal to go against, this clown, frankly? And that concern was understandable. I was a little disappointed in the way that some of my colleagues in the Democratic Party and Democratic politics spoke about him. I think there was a bit of disrespect given his history and his commitment and everything that he's done and sacrificed for this country. But we came to where we are today, and I think we're all breathing a sigh of relief and also have a new passion about the upcoming road to victory.
You spoke then about President Biden's tenure in public life. And so obviously there was a legacy that needed to be protected. And I think that in that period between the debate and when he decided he wouldn't recontest the presidency, I certainly, from an outsider's perspective, felt like I was worried about this great legacy that this person has given, not just to his party, but to his nation. And I was wondering, oh my God, if this goes on longer and longer and longer, the patience of not just people within the Democratic Party, but voters as well, how is that going to play out? I feel like, though, the timing in the end probably worked quite well, right? But people now, the gushing of, column inches in the papers about saying how wonderful it was and such a brave choice, which it really was. I think that was I just want to get your reflections on that.
Truly, I think that if there had been any other person in his position, even at that age, that they would not have taken the position that he did of putting country before himself. I think we saw a man that has gone through a lot of loss in his life. He understands having to sacrifice in ways that none of us will ever know, from the death of family members to the death of sons and his wife and children before that. And I think that because of that, he has the strong sense of country and sense of service to others to have been able to make that choice. If it had been anybody else, I don't think that they would have been brave enough or had the courage, as I said, the courage to do that. So I think he was the perfect person for that, and I'm just glad that he chose country first, and we weren't surprised.
When he finally made the decision and announced that he wouldn't recontest and seek the nomination, there was like this short window where I think all of us, well, I was thinking like who, obviously Vice President Harris was going to put her hand up, but I thought there would be, maybe two or three others. Like we were kind of looking at, Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan, maybe a couple, maybe a couple of others. Are you surprised how quickly things moved to coalesce behind Vice President Harris? Because that was quick.
Listen, one of the fun things about politics is we all get to have these fantasy lives, and sometimes we get to fantasize for a bunch of years leading up to an election, or we get to fantasize for 1 week. I was not surprised that it was Harris. I think as the Democratic Party, we knew she had a history, and she was already polling well above where Biden was against Trump, and she has spent 4 years battling him. She has the record for doing so and the record of success alongside Biden's very successful administration that is making up for the damage and destruction of Trump. That I was not surprised. But of course, it was a fun little week there where we were throwing up, who could it be? And then we had that with the vice presidential as well. But I was not surprised that everyone rallied behind her. I think, powerful party leaders to unions to everyone else said, this is it. We can breathe a sigh of relief. This is not only a woman, this is a woman of color, this is a woman of merit, this is a woman with record. And I wasn't surprised at all, especially again, because the polls even before Biden dropped out were showing that she was a much better candidate to go against him.
We don't
and
get
I think sometimes, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. Sorry, finish that thought, Sarah.
I think sometimes we get a little mental block in our head about the way that politics works, and that the Democratic Party already has kind of a setup succession plan, but we have that for a reason. And I think that she was the perfect choice, in my opinion. And I think that's why we all kind of breathed a sigh of relief.
Absolutely. We don't get a sense of what's happening in terms of the mechanics of the way that the Democratic Party operates through the lens of the media. You're a delegate. You're one of the 3,949 delegates to the convention. You wield a lot of power yourself. She was. I wouldn't say that. She was. You're doing this podcast, okay? Vice President Harris, when she stood up and said, "I will be seeking the nomination of my party," she said, "This will not be a coronation, and there will be democratic processes in which we will go through." What exactly was happening behind the scenes? By either herself or the campaign to reach out to people just like you that have a say on who is going to be the nominee. Just give us a sense of what work was done to ensure that this wasn't a coronation, but she was actually seeking the endorsement of people like yourself.
Sure. And she said that right off the bat, and I applaud her for that, because I think we have so much through the media, and even when Trump was running against Hillary Clinton, this idea of this almost being like a monarchy and people are just passing down family to family, these positions. From what I understand from our own party, we were given points about who she was and her candidacy and everybody else. But I think you can't argue with her record of success. I mean, we've seen people try to ignore women's success. We saw that with Hillary Clinton. But you can't ignore it. Like at this point, she had spent the last 4 years governing. She was with the most experienced president in American history, which everyone has said about Biden. As you said, we've seen column after column about his history as a leader. She helped both implement and pass historic legislation during that. She's gone up against people as a district attorney and essentially an attorney general. Her successes spoke for herself, and compared to the other candidates, I don't think that from my vantage point as a delegate, I saw anyone who was really comparable to where she was and who we needed in that position. And I think that it was so quick because there's really no time to waste. I mean, we're very close to the convention, and time is of the essence. And for you all know from the organizing world and from understanding politics, you have to act quickly and you have to act swiftly. And the smartest thing for us was to all coalesce behind her. And it was a pretty unanimous across the board vote. And there was a lot of excitement around it. And it was just really exciting to see that happen again for a woman that is deserving. So.
we're going to talk about the strengths of her candidacy in a moment, but I just wanted to sort of talk about some of the internals that are happening at the moment, but also some of the things that have been discussed about her previous run for the presidency. She obviously was a candidate for the Democratic nomination in that 2019 to 2020
Mhm.
primary season. And, when she first announced that she would be seeking the nomination in mid 2019, she really burst onto the national scene and was seen as the front runner. And then
Mhm.
obviously we went through a series of debates where there was 20 Democrats on the TV screen. You were able to buy widescreen TVs to fit everyone.
Yeah.
But then by early December of 2019, so like a month before the first ballot, the Iowa caucus, she had to suspend her campaign. And I remember maybe 3 or 4 days before that, there was an article in the New York Times that was quite obviously elements within the campaign were leaking against each other.
Right.
And what I want to get, what gives you hope that this time we're not going to repeat the same mistakes where she bursts onto the scene like a beautiful big star and then it sort of fades by the time we get to the time that we need to vote?
So I think that first of all, the thing to remember is there's a really big difference between running a campaign in a primary against 20 other people vying for 5 minutes of attention on a debate stage versus running in a hugely crowded field versus going one-on-one with Donald Trump, the clown, as we call him in the podcast.
We can call him the clown for the rest of the episode if you like. I'm fine with that.
um, there's a huge difference there, and so I think that the momentum she has behind her now is because we are so close to the election, and I don't see it stopping. Frankly, I think that Donald Trump has not only been destructive to our democracy, but has also created an insane amount of instability in his own Republican Party, and an instability that's felt by majority of minority people in America and across the globe. That her ability to stand firmly and now with 4 years in the White House alongside Biden, I think that just positions her very differently than she was in the primaries. She generated a lot of excitement. That's why she was chosen to become a running mate. And again, she's a veteran of national politics and state politics, which I think is particularly important because she understands that like very grassroots level of campaigning. So 4 years later, I think we have a very different Vice President Harris and candidate Harris. And again, going toe to toe with Donald Trump, who has already flip flopped on whether or not he is going to debate her. Certainly says something. And as I've reminded many people over and over again, she also made Brett Kavanaugh cry. So how can we not be excited by that?
I know some of those clips were coming out in the days at which she announced, I completely forgot about that. That was such a great
She sure
moment.
did.
And
It was
also
a
the
wonderful
experience,
moment.
to your point, the experience that she brought in her capacity in public life in California. California is the sixth biggest economy in the
Yes.
world. And they're trying to make it out that she was sort of some West Coast liberal out of touch with reality. But I mean, California could
If
be a
you
country in its own right.
Absolutely. And I can even say that for New York and for Texas, where I was born, in New York, where I now live, it's very easy to look at Texas and think that it's super red. But if you actually look from Austin below and in major cities and across the state of Texas, it's a hugely democratic field of voters and supporters. And you look in New York and you see these blips of very progressive areas like New York City and our five boroughs and some other areas. But then you see super red bursts across the state. Um, as you all know, a lot of this has to do with voter engagement, voter suppression, all of this. So her state of California and the fact that she was able to successfully be an attorney general there and someone who yes maybe had a lot of people who didn't love her, the way she had to stand up with the law. She still had a lot of respect in a state that is very diverse, not only demographic wise, but also voter wise. There are huge pockets in California that are conservative and some that are democratic. So, yeah. So to call it a liberal, a latte liberal, I would say is probably not the right title for her.
And I can vouch for you in that. My partner and I were heading up to the what's the national park with El Capitan? That's terrible, mental block. Oh, Yosemite,
All right.
Yosemite Park, right?
I
And
said I would speak politics, not geography, Stephen.
I don't know. We were going to Yosemite and we went to this little town, and I kid you not, the post office had a Trump flag flying out the front of it. And I
Absolutely.
was said to my partner, we're not in Kansas anymore. We're not on the West Coast
No.
anymore. Um, anyway.
Yes.
So the other thing I just wanted to get your thoughts on, it was reported during the week that Harris has, sorry, before it was written during the week, Harris has obviously sort of consumed the campaign team that had been set up for President Biden.
Yeah.
But then has added on some sort of alumni from Obama land and Hillary World, David Plouffe, former Obama campaign director, Stephanie Cutter, Jennifer Palmieri, who's obviously worked for both Obama and for Hillary. In some ways, it kind of is this kind of Avengers Assemble moment, or is this, are we seeing what's going on here? Is Vice President Harris just trying to add or put her stamp on the campaign, or are they? I'm trying to work out the internals of this. Is this a good thing? I mean, broadly, I think it's a good thing, right? We're bringing on some talent. But you know, it's like you've worked on a campaign, and when others, outsiders, come in, it's like, who the fuck are you, like, coming in here and telling us what to do? You know, so is there a good vibe going on? Is what I guess want to get a sense.
Sure. I think that this is pretty typical of most campaigns. From working on Hillary's campaign, I'm just so excited to see some of those alumni and the Obama alumni join forces here. Regardless of winning or losing, these are some of the most talented people in America, if not the world, in terms of politics, and people who are strongly committed to progressive values and making sure that we win. I think that regardless of her taking on those people, you've seen a change in the tone of this campaign. There's a lot more hope. I think before we were just trying to say, my friends and I always joked that we would talk to people about not wanting to vote for Biden because they weren't inspired by him. And we were like, you just, pardon my language, just fucking vote. Just fucking vote.
Absolutely.
And I actually have a necklace that says it on there. It says just fucking vote on my necklace.
Love it.
But now it's like people are excited. Like, we're going to vote. We're going to get out the vote. We're going to get out the vote. And so in spite of bringing on people from and continuing with the same group of people who, by the way, Julie Rodriguez Chavez is an incredible leader. And I have been so lucky to work near her and Obama and watch her do incredible things from a legacy of Cesar Chavez and farm worker organizing. I'm so excited to see her now get to take another stab with Harris and really continue the march forward. I think American presidential campaigns take a long time to build. There's not time for her to start from scratch. And why would she? Look at the talent that Biden's team is already bringing to the table. And also, again, her bringing in her people who have already been successful in the past, and also putting her spin on things as a Black and Indian woman is I think it's a powerful message that the Democratic Party has always been here. The Democratic Party has needed to be reinvigorated, but the Democratic Party still stands as it did with the Clintons and is continuing to fight for the American people. And I think that this is not something to worry about. I think this is just how it is, right? We don't have time to start from scratch. And why would we when we have such talent and such passion behind her?
Let's talk about the money that's being raised. We're seeing historic levels of fundraising.
Insane.
Yeah, you're right. Insane is the word. Trump raised $139 million for the month of July, which was a record for July in a presidential year.
Yes.
The trouble is that Vice President Harris raised $310 million in the final 9 days of July alone. Just talk about the level of enthusiasm right now on the ground for the Harris campaign, and how do they continue to build on that momentum all the way through to November? Because even though it's only like 87, 88 days until the election, but it's still long, right? Do you know what I mean? It's quick, but it's long.
Yeah. I mean, listen, him standing down this late in the election, I mean, we saw a lull in fundraising. I think all of us saw that. It was trickling in, and God bless Biden. I think he brought up to that point before he stepped down. I think we may be at 96 million in the campaign, which is nothing to scoff at. But Trump obviously was outraising him. And look, the last time a first-term sitting president actually decided not to run for re-election was 1968. And we saw the seismic event that happened, and that's what we're seeing now, right? This is an incredible excitement, and again, hate to keep bringing it back to Texas, but Texas was one of the top states for small donations to Harris the first 24 hours, right? And you see this across the board, and it was really beautiful to watch that map of donations and those small dollar donors come in. I think it makes sense that she's raised a record-breaking amount. She's a record-breaking and historic candidate herself. And I think it's realistic to believe that if we continue this momentum, even through to the convention, we're going to continue to raise money. Now, you can't expect that it's going to be the same amount that we did in that first 48 hours. And I think after Tim Walz, her running mate, was announced, there was another tens of millions that came in. That's always going to die down a little bit. But I'm pretty positive that as we look at the trending upwards of polls that are showing that she's actually not just getting a boost because she got her candidacy announced, but that she has a boost because people are actually starting to believe that we can win this, that's going to continue to help this funding come in for us.
Sources, organizer sources of mine have said that obviously there's hundreds of thousands of folks that have registered to volunteer in the campaign, but few have received a phone call from an actual field organizer. Can you give us a sense of what state the Harris Field program is looking like at this moment? I know it's only been a couple of weeks, so let's give her a bit of time to sort of set things up.
Listen, I think every campaign kind of works on building out a firm team inside the internal campaign system to think about battleground states and how they're going to look at organizing and all of that. I'm not surprised that people have a little bit of a lull in their volunteer requests being answered, because I think at this point, from my understanding, they're looking at how they beef up in these battleground states. And I'm happy to share more as I understand that, but I'm not really sure because I can't speak to the campaign in that. But I'm not surprised that right now what they're trying to do is focus on battleground states and hiring staff to staff those areas and then be able to bring those volunteers in. But I would say to anyone who wants to volunteer, I think more than just voting, it is our civic duty to put time into our democracy. And I'm just excited that, and I hope that people don't lose hope that they haven't got a phone call back or an email. There are so many ways that you can still organize with your local unions, with any of the Democratic parties in your own state. I would just say reach out far and wide, and let's don't give up just because you haven't gotten a phone call back. We need you.
It's a good problem to have when you have too many volunteers and not enough organizers. Not as good as the other way around. Lots of organizers and no volunteers. Okay, let's talk about, you've mentioned the running mate, Tim Walz, and he was announced earlier this week to joining Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket. What does he bring to the ticket that perhaps Josh Shapiro, astronaut Mark Kelly did not?
Sure. I mean, listen, the vice president had a really good problem, right? She had this incredible stacked list of candidates that would have been great running mates, great hype men, as I like to say. And I think that really much like Biden became the unity choice in 2020, Governor Walz is that unity choice. I think he is he's somebody that's so relatable, just from being a 6-term congressional member in a heavily conservative district and being able to hold on to that seat and be someone who conservative voters still voted for as a progressive and a not shy progressive. He will say to people's face, I'm not embarrassed to say that I support free lunches. I'm not embarrassed to say that education is too expensive and that public education needs better funding. As a teacher himself, as a National Guard, and his wife was also a teacher. I mean, this is a man that not only walks the walk, he talks the talk. And there was an article that just came out today. You know, Tim Walz doesn't have stocks and all of these, like we said, these liberal latte kind of mentality that a lot of times people look at the Democratic Party as, and frankly, I think have at some point done it to ourselves by alienating this working class America. And he is exactly that. And he reminds us that you should not be ashamed to be working class, to be unionized, and to believe in progressive values and the ways that social services and creating lines of equity for everyone around us actually makes this country stronger. And so I think he was an incredible pick. I think it was very smart for us. But not only that, I think that more Americans can see themselves in the White House with both of them in it.
He really gives off such warm vibes, and like, I mean, it's literally like we're about to put the coach from Friday Night Lights into.
Yes, I was about to say he's Friday Night Lights for America.
But more
it's a
happy.
Veteran, a former school teacher. He loves to like make fun of his daughter on TikTok. Like, how can you not? And he himself is a cat lady, I guess. JD Vance's, so I think it's National Cat Day, right? I think it is today. And so to all the cat ladies out there, JD Vance says hello.
And well, I don't actually have any questions about JD Vance. Maybe when we talk to the Republicans, we can talk a bit about him.
I don't think we need to.
Yeah, I know. The guy's just so irrelevant. But it was interesting to note that both he and the Veep spoke at a rally is it in Eau Claire? Am I pronouncing that correctly? In Michigan, in a rural town in Wisconsin.
Yes. Yeah.
Like they've actually gone into a rural town in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Wisconsin is a crucial battleground state. And obviously he is from the Midwest. And to the points you said before, it's just interesting to note that they've actually targeted that, because obviously one of the reflections from the Hillary campaign was they lost so many votes in so many of those counties in rural parts of the Midwest. You don't have to win those counties, but you just need to get a return on a certain amount of votes. Is that something that they're signaling, aren't they, to the campaign? This is something that we need to prioritize if we are to hold Michigan, Wisconsin, and probably even Pennsylvania, if you think about it. Is that your reflections?
Sure. I think, and again, I did work on the Hillary campaign under the Latino outreach team and the National Latino Outreach Director as the National Latino Outreach Director. And our focus was in different areas. But, I think all of us have that were a part of that campaign and we're looking to the leaders of those campaigns. The one thing that I have such respect for is that Hillary Clinton herself and the folks that ran that campaign had the ability to be constructively critical of ourselves, both as a party and as a campaign. And I think lacking the communication and investment in those areas, and it didn't mean that they weren't cared about, but it wasn't a strategic move that worked out. And I think a lot of it is strategy, but the beautiful thing about the way that we're working through this in 2020 and 2024 is we're rebuilding what the Democratic Party is and sharing that with people. And that means that it represents everyone, including middle America, which I think for far too often was feeling ignored, and rightly so. So when major cities are getting all of the attention and no one's coming to speak to you, I can understand why that sentiment started to build.
It would also put the shits up the Trump campaign to think that they're going to what they would perceive as their heartland as well. If I was a campaign manager, I would be worried about that.
Absolutely. And to be honest, all of America is everyone's America. So I mean, we need to be able to speak to everyone. And one of the most wonderful things that I've heard people from Biden to anyone else, including John McCain, when you go into office, you're representing all of America, not just the people that voted for you.
Yeah.
And so I'm happy to see our party take that to heart.
Excellent. So am I. And so is everyone else, I think, that wants to see them win. I do want to talk about the narrative of the two campaigns in a moment. But before we do that, I thought we should just ground ourselves for our audience about how things are tracking in terms of the polling. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview of kind of where we have, how the polls have shifted since the announcement, first of all, and then maybe we can do a bit of a deep dive on I want to get you some of your reflections on some of the battleground states.
Sure. And so again, I have not been studying too much on this, just reading about as much as everybody else has as we kind of look towards the convention in, I guess, a week or a week and a half. And, we saw 2.5 weeks after Joe Biden dropped out. It's been about 2.5 weeks since that happened. And we saw a bounce in the polls and we said, okay, great. Bounce in the polls, we're raising money. Amazing. What has now come out is, and then I was saying earlier, is that bounce is no longer just a bounce, it's a trend. And she's continually trending upward, and it's still a very tight race. And I think that that's where, when people come to any of us and say, so do you guys think you're going to win this? I always say we can win it, but it's going to take on the ground, as you said, getting those volunteers, getting these small donations, locking in these incredible people that she's brought in, and supporting the team that was already doing the work there, and really organizing to make sure we win this. We're not up by that much, but we are trending up, and that's a really, really positive thing to see.
Looking at the New York Times is an aggregator of all of the polls, the state-based polls across those battleground states. The aggregator who leads the polls nationally, and this just ticked up over the last couple of days, Harris is now leads by a point over Trump on the aggregator for the national poll. And then at a state level in Wisconsin, it's a virtual tie at 49% points each. Michigan, a tie at 49. And the aggregator on the New York Times has Harris down by 2, but on 538, they have Harris up. For by 45.5 to Trump's 44.4. So to your point, we are starting to see a trend there. We're just waiting on states like Arizona and Nevada, Georgia, Minnesota, North Carolina, Virginia. Can I get your sense, since you are on that other side of the country, Arizona and Nevada? Because I keep on trying to do the math to get to 270, and I kind of want to just lock in Arizona and Nevada and just make that.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be like, I keep on doing, there's this app, which I should put in the link to the bio for the episode. You can just you can be your own Steve Kanacki. You can touch the screen and make them move to different. Yes. It's very fun. Anyway.
If they're having a moment right now. Yeah.
Oh, I would love to get him on this podcast. I'm the biggest fan of his. Anyway, Arizona and Nevada and locking them away. And then it sort of all comes down to Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, but it's not that simple. Talk to us about those two particular states, Arizona and Nevada, in terms of what work needs to be done there for the Harris campaign to make sure that they stay blue.
Listen, that's work that's already being done by congressional members and senators in those areas. The land of Harry Reid and among other things. I mean, the organizing in those two states is really remarkable, and I think that we've seen a huge burst of also like the Latino vote there that is pretty vital and important. And I think investing in and putting in the work and bringing in more people on the ground to these states is what we have to do. I think we've seen that done in Pennsylvania. We're seeing that, like you said, we're putting more attention into Wisconsin and these other areas. I think it's just putting boots on the ground, knocking and making sure that people are actually coming out to vote. And a lot of these states, and I'm no expert in any of these, but I know just from a sense of being on the ground for this long and coming from a state like Texas, that has so much potential to be blue, but is a very, very low engagement factor. We're suffering from low engagement. We're suffering from people who are not inspired. And I think the only way we get there is to take people like we have on the ballot now and get their names out there and get their messages out there and pound the pavement and annoy the crap out of people the next 80 days. Get to the point where people say, I promise I will vote if you will stop calling me.
Very good. Okay. Can we turn our attention to the contrast of the two campaigns? And I think you kind of already answered this question earlier on. When Harris ran in the Democratic primary, I thought that she struggled to find her lane in sort of that policy conversation because she was getting ripped apart between the progressives and the moderates. That's probably not an issue anymore, right? I think she can just be who she wants to be in this contest against the clown that is Donald Trump. Yeah. But they are going to try and unpick her record, or certainly try and point to a record that says that she's a West Coast latte sipping liberal that's out of touch with middle America. Is that something that we should be hypersensitive to? Or do you think that her record stands and people will actually look at her say, no, you're a moderate Democrat, and that's where we're going to win this election?
I think her record stands, and let's be clear, we're never going to win over most of the people that voted for Donald Trump. There are things that are never going to be a part of our vernacular or our party platform that are ever going to attract those people. We're not after those. We're after the folks that are staying home. Where in my opinion, again, I see us as being completely contrast to him, not as latte sipping liberals, but as people who are, proponents of hope over fear. We're about progress over persecution. We're about defending democracy over dismantling it. We have literally watched Donald Trump say that he's going to get rid of voting, say that he's going to do. We watched Donald Trump do this on January 6th. So I think, for me, it is now just inspiring people who have a record of watching Donald Trump do this, have a record now of watching her be more than a latte sipping liberal from the West Coast. She was a vice president of America with a president that has brought us back from doomsday, literally. And I think that puts her in a really strong position. And again, with the addition of Tim Walz as her VP candidate, somebody that a lot of people can relate to, our Friday night lights football coach, veteran and former teacher. I think she's in a great place to be that moderate and that person that's a lot more relatable to and is inspiring those people that stayed home and were not inspired by Biden, and maybe the ones that chose not to vote for Hillary for similar reasons or more. There's a lot to unpack with Hillary for another podcast, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm not ready yet. No.
Don't worry. We've done that to death a couple of years ago, so it's okay. Yeah. We'll put that to bed, I think. I am interested in your take on the sort of the positive framing of the campaign. I mean, the word freedom is being used a lot, and then that overarching word of freedom is applying in so many different kind of forms in terms of policy. What's your make of that? Because freedom historically is, I mean, we joke, remember Stephen Colbert when he had the Colbert Report and he really hammed up the conservative kind of language, and it was all about freedom and, justice and the American way and stuff. So I feel like freedom can sometimes be a very center-right word. Obviously not in the 1960s during the Civil Rights Movement. Freedom actually was a very, very important word in terms of emancipation and ending racial prejudice. But she seems to have grabbed that word back and said, no, this is the word that we are going to use. And I just want to get a sense of your reflections from a communication standpoint about the importance of that in this campaign.
I think it's pointing out, I mean, from what I can see is we've watched our own individual freedoms get taken away from us as women, as minorities, as small business owners, as immigrants. We've literally watched the Republican Party take freedoms that were fought for 4 decades ago away from us. And so freedom is the rally cry right now. I want freedom to my body. I want freedom to vote how I want. I want to be able to vote. He's trying to say he's going to take that away from us. And I love it. I think we need to claim freedom back to where it actually belongs, which is about democracy and about creating a space where people can come together to create values and a place where everyone can find equality and progress, and also be a part of this American dream that we always talk about. You need freedom for that. And I love that she's taking that back, just especially in the shadow of these just horrible things that have happened due to the changes in the Supreme Court, which were because of Donald Trump. And again, as a woman, particularly for me, the freedom to choose what I want to do with my body is on the table.
The contrast then with Donald Trump and the attack lines on Donald Trump. I mean, at the start, she set it up as, I've been a prosecutor and I prosecute criminals, and I'm going to prosecute a case against this guy. What do you think about that?
I think it's great. I love it. I mean, it's really hard to ignore the fact that this man is convicted of crimes. And I think that allowing people to kind of airbrush that away one of the craziest things in the world. We're not dating a president. We have to marry this president, and I don't want to marry a criminal, right? I don't want to, I don't want to be married to someone like that. And I think her positioning herself in that you're on the stand and I'm the one asking you the questions is fantastic. And I think you've seen it across the board also with a lot of the cartoonists in the US and the way they have put him in a courtroom against her. This is great. I mean, again, this is also, she's unapologetic about the fact that she is a strong, opinionated and smart attorney that can take this man on, and she's not afraid of him. And point out his flaws. He certainly points out women's flaws on a regular basis. So maybe he should take a page out of his own book.
And
let's be honest, these guys are weird, as Tim Walz said. These guys are weird. They're so weird.
It's such an obvious call, it kind of feels a little bit sort of like schoolyard kind of dude. You're a bit of a dickhead. But no one called it.
He's a real jerk.
Yeah. And everyone's going, yeah, you're right. There is a bit of a calm versus crazy, isn't there? Kind of contrast happening in this campaign starting to pan out too, right?
Yeah. And I think it's just that kind of the playfulness of being able to say, like, I can't speak sanity to crazy. So I'm not like, what do you want me to do, Donald? I can't,
Yeah.
I can tell you what I'm going to do for the American people, but I'm not going to take the bait on some ridiculous thing you're saying at the National Black Journalists Conference about me choosing to be Black all of a sudden, which was just nuts.
That was nuts. I don't get the strategy behind that. Do you think that his team said,
I don't think there's strategy.
Yeah, I know that. But do you know what I mean? Like, how did that happen? Like, did his campaign team say, no, you should go here because we do want to court African-American or Black voters and it'd be important for you to go in here, but, Donald, you need to keep a lid on it. But then obviously the very first question was quite pointed about, which is a fair question to ask. You've got a history of being a racist. Why should we vote for you? Basically, was a question.
And then your father as well, right?
Yeah. And then he then obviously just went, here comes old Donald, and it just away he went. And you must be going, oh, mate. Or was it like, he's not stupid. Was it intentional? Was that trying to get back into the media again? Because he would say, I'm going to say some crazy shit here and it's going to get back on TV and I'm going to recapture do you know what I mean? Like, for him, any press is good press.
I think, well, let me put on my armchair therapy hat for a moment.
Please do.
I think we forget how absolutely fucking nuts his Twitter account was when he was president. So think about that and then think about the question you just asked me. I do not think people control this man.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that we have had 4 years of like, okay, or three and a half years of like, all right, like nothing crazy is going on in Twitter. Like they're talking about some legislation, not like sending out absurd tweets in the middle of the night because he's high on McDonald's French fries and hamburgers and whatever else he's doing. Like, I think we forget how unhinged he seemed in those Twitter days of yore. So that's why when he did that at the press conference, I said, "Oh, I remember this guy."
Kovefi.
He just did it on a stage instead of with his thumbs on a phone.
It was interesting comments from Ann Coulter, who said in the media overnight, he's going to spend the first 20 minutes of every rally attacking the popular Republican governor of Georgia or trying out stupid nicknames for Kamala, and said Republicans who expect Trump to run a smart, disciplined campaign are going to be sorely disappointed. I mean, Ann Coulter is the heart of the Republican Party, and for her to come out and say that, really.
Yeah. Listen, he's been doing that to them since he ran the first time. I don't think anybody has been particularly excited by the way this Republican Party has shifted under him. Democrats and true Republicans for sure. But the one thing that Republicans, I want to say do well, but I don't know if that's the right terminology. You always hear it. Republicans fall in line and Democrats fall in love, and they fall in line so well that they keep beating us at things, even if they don't actually agree with, whatever person's in power. And so we need to understand that going into this election is that just because we think he's horrible and they think he's horrible doesn't mean they're not all going to fall in line, because what's worse than Donald Trump? A Democrat in power.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the mentality they've spent. So just fucking vote, Democrats.
Yes, absolutely. All 6 of you that are listening to this, please make sure you do that. Look, I do think the Trump campaign is a bit rattled though, right? Because you can see them testing out new lines. They're not settled on what they're wanting to do. Overnight, I see that Trump, he did that press conference, which once again was 90 minutes of chaos, but was making out like, he was saying that Harris hasn't done a press conference. I'm doing a press conference. He's trying to grab back the conversation or trying to get back some kind of control over the campaign. He's agreed to this ABC debate on Tuesday, the 10th of September, which originally, I know. What are we learning from these actions of the Trump campaign?
I mean, I think you're dealing with a toddler. I think you're dealing with a child that's throwing a temper tantrum. His VP pick has embarrassed him more than helped him, I think. JD Vance is really, I think he may have taken the prize from Sarah Palin as worst VP candidate,
that is a huge call.
I think he may be close, if not already done it. And I think that you're just watching a man who doesn't really know how to regulate his own emotions, let alone his own campaign or party, watching things kind of collapse around him. Him refusing to debate her was, I think, one of the dumbest, aside from what happened at the Black Journalist Conference, one of the dumbest things to do. It's almost like you're taking your ball and running away to go hide. And her being willing to consider going on Fox to do a debate, I mean, she's just outshining him left and right. And I think at some point people had to say, like, man, just, suck it up, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm thinking about the debate and how they handle that, because one thing that I did, my takeaways from the 2016 Republican primary was, and then actually the general with Hillary, was because he's such an unconventional debater that no one really knew how to debate him. It'll be interesting to see how Vice President Harris does that. I just want to get your thoughts on that. And I also want to sort of ask you the question about gender. It's something we haven't spoken about, but this is the second time that a woman is running at the top of the ticket. And not only is she a woman, but obviously she's got a diverse background as well. The bar is set higher for women. We all know this. And so there are
even higher for women of color. Yeah,
indeed. So it's going to be greater challenges here. And so we need to be hip to that kind of stuff, right, from a campaign standpoint. So just want to get your reflections on how to approach this, not having a magic wand.
Well, first and foremost, I think what made Hillary and what's going to make Kamala so incredible on stage with this kind of batshit crazy person. Sorry. I just there's no other way to describe his debate style. Is that being attorneys, I think, has been helpful to them. I think they're very measured. They've been in public office for so long, but I do think that I'm very impressed, and I've noticed just their candor, their demeanor, and all of their ability to just keep straight to the point and answer the question and not take the bait. I think is something I admired so much in watching Hillary, and I think she was formidable against him on all the debates. And I don't see it changing with Kamala. I think Kamala has an even bigger presence at times. And I'm really looking forward to it, frankly. Now, yes, he's probably going to try and say things to dodge questions. I hope at this point in 2024, the media and the hosts of these debates do a better job of reining in the crazy. And actually sticking to the debate. I think in 2016, we saw them kind of giving him a little too much freedom to screw with the actual content of what we were trying to say to America. So I'm hoping the media, and I think they have seen that. I don't want to blame them at all. But again, nobody knew that Donald Trump was going to be like he was. So I just hope that this time around it is going to be better. A better constructed debate. And I'm excited to watch her. And I don't know how he's going to be prepared for it. But like you said, if he totally changes demeanors, then that also is going to really alienate the population that loves his off the cuff So
Yeah.
I'm interested to see what their strategy is, if there is one.
I feel like on behalf of the media and particularly for this next debate with the ABC, they need real-time fact checkers with a buzzer. So every time he lies, it
That'd
goes,
be great.
or maybe they could
Maybe she can just do it.
superimpose his nose to get longer and longer throughout the night. But don't tell
Well,
anyone. So people are watching
well, we
going,
know
why is
how
his
much you
nose getting
guys,
longer?
we know how much you guys love cowbells in America. So
That
maybe
would be
we'll just
great.
start
More
ringing a cowbell.
cowbell.
Just kidding. Just
I
kidding.
got to have more cowbell. I want to
Kamala can
wrap up.
just ring it every time.
Yeah, absolutely. That would be, yeah, there's so much you could do with this, and you'd probably get more people to watch as well.
Yeah.
The I want to end today's chat on a high. 2 points. One question. One reflection. Mayor Rudolph, who has played Vice President Harris on Saturday Night Live as they head into the election season, clearly has now got a job again because I'm clearly
Yes.
Lorne Michaels is definitely calling her up right now and saying, Ms. Rudolph, we need your services for the coming season.
So excited.
So that's just a reflection. But you're a delegate and you're off to Chicago for the Democratic National Convention. Just sort of give us a sense personally how you're feeling about going to the convention. Maybe get us a bit of an insight as to what happens at the convention. Then the hope that you want to take out of this 4 or 5 days of sort of Democratic loving.
Sure. Democratic love fest. I mean, I'm just so honored to be a delegate, and it's a strange thing to know that there's not that many of us in such a large country. So it's just mind blowing, and so I'm really excited to go into it. This is the first time I'm going to a convention and not working as a campaign staffer, so that is going to be an interesting shift. These conventions, much like conferences, have lots of different events, parties at night, people getting together, states hosting things, organizations hosting things. But a lot of it is about talking about our party platform, the next days ahead, how we all start to go back to our own states and rally the troops and really put the work in, and put our stuff aside to volunteer our hours to get our states out for Kamala and Walz. So I'm excited. I think it's going to be tiring. It's Monday to Friday morning or Monday to Thursday. Very excited for the official vote where we all stand in our delegations and get to vote state by state, which everyone will be able to watch live stream. I'll see if I can put a hi Australia sign up for you.
Yes. Can you do that? Hi, socially
Done.
democratic podcast listeners. That's
Hi,
something like that. We can send you something.
Done. And there's going to be a lot of activations. There's going to be organizations hosting kind of a democracy expo that talks about the stuff that they're doing across the country. So Planned Parenthood to Black Lives Matters to everything else. And, people from all different areas just coming together, coalescing and talking about the things that matter to us, and talking also with constructive criticism about how our party needs to be different. And, there will be, I'm sure, protesters as there are at everything else. But the wonderful and beautiful thing about the Democratic Party is that this is a party that isn't monolithic. We don't all feel the same way about every single issue. We have moderate to super liberal to, everywhere in between. And I think the beautiful thing about us is that at least we create platforms so that we can speak about it. And we're not all going to agree all the time. And often that's why it is sometimes hard for us to win elections and to get behind one candidate. But I'm hopeful, and I hope that watching the unity and the unifying of our party through her and her running mate is going to kind of set us out in a really powerful momentum. And I hope they can't catch us.
Absolutely. And to your point, it seems like everyone is completely behind her. Like AOC is being great on her social media platforms. Yeah. Plus you're seeing like Joe Manchin. It just seems like everyone is just coalescing around her candidacy.
And I think they're taking a page from President Biden's book. This is not about a one individual person. When we're walking into a ballot to cast our ballot, I'm not walking in to vote for myself. I'm walking in to vote for the undocumented immigrant who's facing domestic violence and is afraid for their life. I'm voting for the migrants that are being used as political pawns when really all they're trying to do is escape, the terrors of their own country and create a new life for themselves and their family. I'm voting for a woman in poverty and families in poverty who all they want is that one chance to be able to have stability of food access and health access and everything else. I'm voting for veterans that far too often are sent on the front lines, but when they come back, we don't take care of them. I think that the unifying of this party and the way that we need to walk into this is that much like these folks are coming and unifying behind her, as a party, we need to unify behind everyone else. It's not about me, it's about us. So I think that we're getting back to that, and it's a beautiful thing to watch.
It is a beautiful thing to watch, and we are going to be watching it from our lovely warm couches here in Australia while you guys are all hanging out in Chicago, eating deep dish pizza. Sarah,
it's a casserole.
It really is. It's a meal and a half. Sarah, thank you so much for your time on the show today. We really appreciate it. Good luck in Chicago. And any Americans who are listening to the show, please, if you haven't registered to vote, and make sure you vote Democrat in the lead up to the election. We'd love to have you back on the show as we get closer and closer to November 5. And until then, take care.
Thanks, guys.
Hey there. Thanks for listening to Socially Democratic. Did you like the podcast? Hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Podchaser. And to get all the latest updates on Socially Democratic, follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we'll see you next Friday.